In week 5 of our cannabis series with the Hill Street Beverage Company, we are focusing on cannabis and health issues. Joining us now is Hill Street CEO Terry Donnelly and Sean Bevan, the Chief Science Officer at the Arthritis Society. Welcome both of you to What She Said.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, for people living with chronic pain, the options for medication to assist with pain management are limited. Each has its drawbacks. So, Sean, let's start by talking about the differences between medical and recreational cannabis when it comes to treatment options.
Yeah, it's a good point. So chronic pain is, a serious problem for Canadians. And, we know there are over 6 million Canadians living with arthritis. So for over 40% of those people, chronic pain really affects their daily living. So we need alternative ways to manage chronic pain. And the Arthritis Society, we think that medical cannabis might be a potential alternative to some of those traditional pharmaceuticals, especially in the context of the opioid crisis and things like that. So, for us, medical versus recreational, we're really focused on medical cannabis and the potential therapeutic application of it.
So what are the traditional pain medications that arthritis sufferers now use?
There would be several. Some of them are related to anti-inflammatories. Some of them would be related to stronger medications. And some of the challenges there are around addiction and long-term use. So really thinking about alternatives that have fewer side effects would be something that we'd be looking to do.
And that is something that has been proven, I think, with medical cannabis.
Well, it's a great point. So one of our fundamental areas of focus here is really to understand more about medical cannabis and its application. So there's no doubt that from arthritis patients, we hear a huge amount of anecdotal evidence about its benefits. And for us, we want to make sure that we're really backing that up with strong research, strong information to know, what formulations, what different situations you should be using medical cannabis in.
I'd like to know, because I have arthritis in my right knee, the two plates rubbed together. And I had like a hyaluronic acid injected in to help it, but didn't last as long as I hoped it would. So now the pain is back. But what forms of cannabis offer a potential alternative to the traditional pharmaceuticals? I mean, are we talking topicals, CBDs, taking it as an oil? Like, how does the medical cannabis work?
Yeah, so there could be several.
Okay.
And so one of the things that we'd really want to stress right now is that if you're taking cannabis to treat a condition, that you're really talking to a doctor about it, and that's happening under the authorization of your physician. So the reality is there are different forms, there are different ways you can take it. We do need to understand more about the research behind it to give us really, really strong clinical practice guidelines. But that's a space where we think it should be between a patient and a physician. And, obviously backed up by really evidence-based information that the Arthritis Society certainly is focused on, primarily through our website to make sure that people have access to what they need to know.
So let me ask both of you, we have known for some time that this was going to be legalized, and certainly for medical use. What research is ongoing? Because this is something doctors need, I think, to draw on.
One of the fascinating things that I find, and there's an article this morning in Forbes magazine of McGill University publishing new research that's demonstrating new ways that they're uncovering the cannabinoids in your system are being absorbed and affect different body functions. And that's literally a daily occurrence. I mean, we had 90 years where research into the actual drug itself, into the plant itself, was largely prohibited, and still in the United States, it's extremely limited what can be done. So, there's very few places that have long history of research. There's just a huge amount of work that's being done recently as medicinal cannabis became available, but it's still in the very early days, and we're starting to see really promising news coming out of it. It's very exciting what's happening, but it's a long road still ahead of us.
Sean, the Arthritis Society is funding research into the use of medical cannabis and is leading a coalition of voices from across the Canadian healthcare sector and calling on the Government of Canada to invest $25 million over 5 years to conduct research into medical cannabis. So how's that going?
Yeah, so I would say, the Arthritis Society took a really strong leadership role a few years ago. So, we were actually the first health charity to launch a dedicated call for research proposals around medical cannabis. So I think that was really, really important. And through that work, we're investing in 2 projects right now. One focused more on the kind of basic biology that you just talked about, and one more around clinical application of medical cannabis. So really, really important. But one of the things that we've been really excited supported by has been really an increased interest from our partners, both in the health charity sector, but also by the federal government. So the biggest funder of health research in the country, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, they have a new cannabis research strategy. So we think that's great. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that while there are a lot of important questions to ask around recreational cannabis, we want to make sure that we continue to focus on medical cannabis and its potential benefits for patients.
Well, may I ask both of you, anecdotally, I hear from people they would have more trust in somebody selling medical cannabis than they would in their doctor's knowledge in terms of pain, inflammation. Is that justified or no longer?
Oh, I don't think it's justified at all. I think what's happened is that consumers, there's been this void of information where it's been really difficult to get the medical profession to actually step up and really dig in and learn. And that's based on the fact that there's been a lack of really high quality research that's been done. So the anecdotal information becomes Bible, it becomes gospel, because consumers need that void of data filled, and they turn to a person who seems knowledgeable and seems like they know what they're talking about. But I think, it's crucial that we actually get real evidence-based information and insight into what the potential is for us, because I think it will do a disservice to us if we don't use data, if we don't use that proper evidence and research, and it will send people down all kinds of paths that they shouldn't really be going.
Well, you're a producer and you're planning on producing cannabis-infused wine and beer. So you are doing research, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, we're relying on external parties to do the research. I mean, as a product producer, we're not physicians. We're not medical experts. So we're going to be relying on what we see as the right third-party data that's proven. And we actually see our business producing 3 different segments of products. So there's a recreational, what we call the adult use segment. Then we see a therapeutic or functional benefit, something that's like an on-the-counter beverage. So anti-inflammatory, like a Tylenol, different nutraceutical products that could be CBD-based or sport recovery beverages. And then we actually are prepared to go into, with our license, medicinal product development that's produced under contract for medicinal or pharmaceutical companies. So we have the ability in our facility to make those kinds of products because we're regulated under Health Canada, and you have to be able to produce in that kind of environment in order to handle cannabis.
Okay, let's say, speaking of regulations, this one upsets me. Medical cannabis patients are required to pay sales tax on their medication, and as of October 17th, they're required to pay a further 10% excise tax. No other physician-authorized drug is subjected to taxation. So, Sean, do you think this is an unfair policy?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that we're really concerned about, and it relates to affordability of medicine. So, as you say, there's no other medicine that's taxed in Canada.
And an extra one coming.
Correct. So now with the approval of recreational cannabis, now it's also subject to an excise tax as well. So it's something that the Arthritis Society and others with our partners, we're continuing to advocate for on behalf of arthritis patients, because we don't think that's an appropriate sales tax or excise tax to be applied here.
What is the justification? Do you know?
I think there's a fear that people might turn to medicinal cannabis versus recreational cannabis. And the reality is that if we have a strong medical cannabis stream that's regulated, that's monitored by physicians, that should be the appropriate course of action. And the reality is it's not easy to get medical cannabis today. So I think people have to not ignore that.
So I'm wondering why there wouldn't be a 20% excise tax on opioids.
You'd have to ask the government.
Given that is a huge problem.
Yeah, and there are different factors that go into what you tax and how, obviously. And we're talking about more traditional pharmaceuticals versus medical cannabis here. So I think it's an interesting question. But the fundamental issue is that we don't think medical cannabis should be taxed, just like other medications.
I think a lot of the confusion, especially from a regulatory standpoint, comes actually in the form of the product.
Right.
So when you look at a bud of cannabis, whether it's medical or recreational, what's the difference, right? You can't really tell. But if you look at a beer and you look at a pill, you can absolutely tell the distinct difference between something that's intended for social use and something that's intended for the use of a patient under the auspices of a medical treatment program.
Now, Terry, your company has aligned with several organizations. I think prostate cancer is one, MAD Canada is another, that support the infused beverage plan. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we look at responsible use is the most important thing that we're trying to advocate for. And then secondarily, we actually see there's a far greater risk and harm from alcohol than there is from cannabis. And so, one of the things that we're really trying to do is to create a true alternative to alcohol, which is proven to be the single most costly substance that is used by Canadians, to an order of magnitude larger than the cost of cannabis. So we think there's a huge benefit to consumers choosing these alternatives to alcohol that will become available in the marketplace.
Well, now you can learn more about what Hill Street is doing at hillstreetbeverages.com. And Sean, where can people connect with the Arthritis Society to find out what you're doing?
Yeah, arthritis.ca is the best place to find more about the Arthritis Society.
Arthritis.ca.
Well, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Well, she said